Hi, everybody. Awesome. Super excited to get started. Thank you so much for coming to WalkMe. We are honored to be hosting the Customer Success Meetup this month. I know I personally go to these events whenever I can. They're always super informative. Love getting to meet all the panelists, love getting to meet all of you guys. So thank you for joining us. To kick things off, we usually do a host welcome. So I want to ask Danielle, our Director of Customer Success, to join us on stage and tell us a little bit about WalkMe.
Thank you, Brittany. Hi, everyone. Welcome to WalkMe. As Brittany mentioned, I'm Danielle Orlick, and I oversee our customer success and professional services teams here in San Francisco. And tonight is actually a great time for us to be hosting because this topic really complements what our customer success team does on a day-to-day basis, in that product adoption is key to customer success, and customer success informs and is critical to product adoption. So you're probably sitting here asking yourself, what is WalkMe? What do we do? Why am I here? So WalkMe is a digital adoption platform that streamlines your training program, your support program, while also optimizing your customer onboarding experience, really allowing you to have your software and your business jointly reach its highest potential. And so with WalkMe, most of our customers are receiving the best user experience. They're really able to see features exposed to them at the time that they need it. So in context features adopt the software very, very quickly and ultimately receive a positive onboarding experience. So some of our customers that are using WalkMe for customer onboarding as well as product adoption include Job Adder, Cisco Cloud, we have Microsoft Bing Ads, a few to name. And yeah, so to kick things off with the audience here, WalkMe is hiring. We are a rapidly growing startup that is hiring within our operations team, our customer success team, our professional services team. So if you're here to network, we are certainly available. And that's it. Thank you, Brittany. Enjoy your night.
Also, I chatted with some folks in the room who are WalkMe customers. Give us a woot woot. Nice, there we go. I'm sure more of you in here, your companies are using WalkMe and you just aren't aware yet, but if you're not familiar, it's awesome. Stick around, chat with us. We're happy to show you its functionality and also happy to tell you more about our organization. So now it's time for the panel. So I would like to invite up onto stage Emilie, who is going to be moderating. Emilie, take it away.
Cool. Thank you. So I'm going to invite up Matt, who's VP of Product at CI, and tonight we're also speaking with Kush, who is the Head of Product at KeepTruckin. So if you can make a warm welcome for them. Cool, so tonight we're going to be obviously talking about the intersection between product and customer success. It's a critical one, obviously. And I want to start off just with, if you can each share a little bit of background about yourself and kind of what your company does for context.
Sure.
Do you want to?
Yeah, probably should.
Do we need? Yeah.
Do we need the microphone?
Yeah.
I suspect we do. So, came up through the engineering ranks, ran some engineering departments along with product, and then a few years ago decided, actually, like 8 to 10 years ago, decided to focus on product. I guess that happens every once in a while. CircleCI is a fantastic company, joined about 6 months ago. We help automate the software delivery pipeline. So when a developer writes code, that code has to get tested. The tested code has to go through to promotion to get into production. And that whole pipeline is something that we automate. If you've ever heard of Jenkins, we're here to replace Jenkins. Down with Jenkins, in any case. And then had a long history with customer success in a variety of companies and in a variety of different roles. I'm sure we'll get into that, but I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Thanks, Matt. So I also started from engineering, did back in engineering at the company I'm working at, KeepTruckin. Then moved up the ranks. So when I joined, the company was like 8 person, and then eventually, right now, it's like 450 people. So I moved up the ranks, did product management as an individual contributor, and then moved on to leading the product team at KeepTruckin. So yeah, that's high level on my background. So I come from an engineering background, so I have like really focused on technology and all that, versus some of the other product managers who are focused more on like marketing side and things like that.
Oh, this is going to
The
be fun all
handoff.
night. I know. Speaking of handoffs, no, I'm kidding, that's really funny. So starting really macro, I guess, before we dive into the relationship between customer success and product, would love to just get at a high level how you think about building the roadmap and, you know, combining both the qualitative and the quantitative feedback.
Sure. So there are a variety of pieces to that. So first of all, I think a quick description of the product team at CircleCI. So we've opted to make a product team a little bit different than other places. So we have the core set of product managers as you would normally have. We also have the data analysts and data science team as a part of it, and we also have user experience as a part of it. But beyond user experience, we've decided to include design across the board. So the user experience team or design team covers marketing all the way through product. And I think that reflects really a perspective that we have throughout CircleCI, that we want to connect the dots from the departments, and we want to have a holistic experience so that there aren't these false divisions within the company, right? There's this, often this experience where depending on how you structure your departments, you end up with a different result with your customer. So then finally, within the product management team, a practice I've been fortunate enough to hold is to really build a product management team that is about 30% people that came from within the company, then about 50% folks that actually are pure, quote, classical product managers, and the last group ideally from the industry in one way or another. And so in the last couple companies, I've had people that came from customer success, moved into product, and that wound up being a critical backbone to the product team to have that relationship and understand what it means when you're interacting and talking about customers. It's not just about portfolio management, right? It's also understanding or having that empathy. We were just talking about this a few minutes ago, having that empathy for the customer and really bringing that to the product team so that it's in every conversation. And that's something we've done at CircleCI as well, and I think that's really critical.
Yeah. Do you want to take as well how you're balancing kind of the
Yeah,
quantitative and qualitative?
so I'll start with the organization and then we can chat about quantitative, qualitative feedback. So when we started off, there was no product management, and I want to focus on like when you don't have product management, what happens, right? You start doing 10 things and never complete either one of those, right? And everyone is frustrated from CS to sales, everyone, because we committed customers a certain feature that helped with sales, but eventually we never deliver, right? And I think like product management is core to it, like understanding, okay, like if you're starting something, it has to end as well, right? So that was primary motivation of starting, like having defined product management within an organization. Product management at KeepTruckin kind of was born, like came through engineering, so we had a lot of focus on engineering, and we still have a big kind of like understanding of the big picture, where industry is going and all that, right? But we always like we're still struggling trying to understand customers, right? Customer feedback, and there are various reasons to it. And like we are fortunate that like there is a person who kind of moved from CS team recently to product management, and he's kind of helping bridge that gap. So right now, like our product team is it's an enterprise company, so we are really focused on like building a lot of features and like having our product as robust as possible. And it's a fleet management platform, so we are basically divided into like different product groups, right? So we have like compliance, telematics, video monitoring, and so on and so forth. And each functionally, each product team is comprised of engineers, product managers and designers. That doesn't say to the reporting structure, it's more about like how those guys work together. And those guys are like independent to create their own roadmaps, but they have to follow certain vision and strategy overall, but they are independent to create their own roadmaps, and engineering is independent to execute, same for design. So yeah, that's the organization.
Should we do qualitative, quantitative?
Oh, sure. So qualitative, quantitative. So I think like we went through both, right? So when you're a startup, it's pretty much qualitative, right? So you're just running on hunches, right? So it started off, for example, like a feature called vehicle inspections, right? It was purely a hunch, right? And that hunch kind of led to not just an MVP, a full-fledged product, feature that we developed, never tested even, and then kind of like shipped it. Gladly people used it. Gladly kind of shipped it, right?
Scaring so many people right now.
And gladly people used it, right? So we were fortunate that our customers were very, they thought like, okay, it's okay to use KeepTruckin's product. So at that point, like there were a couple of features that went through this process, like 50% were going through this process, while 50% was driven by customer feedback. And I think it was all qualitative, and eventually when we did like this one feature, at that point we realized, okay, like it's too much, right? There needs to be a balance, right? Where customer success, our customers directly convey to us, okay, this task is taking so long, or X is not working, or Y is a problem, right? Okay, that's good to hear, but it needs to be brought up in a bigger picture, right? It needs to be analyzed further, backed up by some analysis. For example, we have a feature like vehicle inspections, as I was talking about. We launched it, and after that we did quantitative analysis and like collected quantitative feedback. Who is using it? How many times do they use it, right? Why do they use it, right? When I say why do they use it, it's like what are like specific things that they are using in that feature, right? We went through that process, and that helped us with two things. First, improve the product and increase the adoption, because we now knew who, after building our product, like who our ideal customer profile is, right? So we can kind of market to the same set of customers versus kind of like struggling and just doing, okay, like this customer says I want to use it, so maybe this customer is going to say I want to use it. So that feedback, the quantitative analysis led to two things. So yeah, that's how we went about it.
So we're very quantitative focused. In fact, we even try to turn our qualitative into quantitative. And I'm sure many of you have a similar process. We have a weekly meeting where the customer success engineers, the customer success managers get together along with a product manager. And all the tickets that are come in are assigned to, well, of course they get a priority and they get critical customers and everything else, but they also get assigned to a component. And so we're looking for hotspots in the system to try to get ahead of where problems are coming in. So what we look at is the number of tickets that are coming in a particular area. And then we're also looking at cycle time for any given support ticket that comes in that actually moves through the customer success team and hits product or hits engineering. We're watching that cycle time to see how long it takes to process through. And then, this is portfolio management, but we do try, we don't really get there, we try to get to about 20% that's always coming from that funnel. Now, some of that is opportunistic. The product managers will sit down with customer success engineering and management to look at which hotspots are in development already, and therefore which ones we should probably uncover and start fixing some of the backlog of issues that are coming from our customers. But we do try, we just literally just count the number of tickets that are coming through by component area, and then look at cycle time. That's how long it's taking for items to flow through. And I would expect that's pretty common. I mean, I've seen that in more than one place. I think it works really well. Beyond that, I think it's always a challenge. I want the stories. So I want to hear the stories. I want to hear about both the good and the bad, although typically I hear about the pain. And I think that helps create empathy within the product team. So we also meet on a regular basis, and I think part of your question was, how do you use the qualitative and quantitative for the roadmap itself? And we have a very fluid roadmap consciously. We're a Kanban company, so we're constantly moving, we're constantly iterating. We reserve the right to change, but we still go through a process, both quarterly and yearly, to take information in from the various departments, from sales, from customer success, from the executive team, from engineering, and try to collate it. As much as possible, we try to avoid having the enterprises wag us. We have a huge cloud presence, and that helps. If in past companies, when you and I'm sure you have a similar problem, when you only have the enterprise customers, it's just so hard to stay focused on a line, right? They'll drag you one way or the other. It's just unique to CircleCI that we have such a large cloud presence that we can sort of go back to the enterprise and say, yes, but aren't some of these other issues also interesting? And we can often turn their heads back to the direction we want to move in. So as much as possible, we try to take the qualitative measures and make them quantitative.
Right. I can tell that obviously there's a lot of quantitative going into kind of how you develop your roadmap in particular. What happens when, and Kush, you touched on this a little, your ideal customer profile changes? And so, you know, the SMB companies maybe you started with, you're trying to move up market now, and so the needs that you have these CSMs advocating heavily for, you know, maybe you have to say no a little more to that because, again, you're going after a different target market. What do you do then?
So this is, that's a hard one. It's very hard because ultimately you have to be deliberate. And in our particular case, we're going up market. So we're through SMB and we're looking at enterprise. And we actually stepped into the enterprise space this past year. And then what we discovered was the projects were just, had enough feature additions that we actually didn't want to do them at this stage. We wanted to wait a little longer. So we actually stepped in and then sort of backed out a little bit. What we did is we really focused the persona and the scenario that we were going to accept, the type of customer we were going to focus on. So we went through and said, okay, we want enterprise customers using AWS, using Linux, using iOS. I mean, we just kind of went through, it's a very detailed product, but we went through and identified the type of enterprise customer that we could handle right now. And then we had to pull back from the others. And that was very painful for both the customer success team and also the revenue team because they had large prospects lined up. And I think the key is you have to step across the line every so often, but you just have to be very deliberate and very open with your teams about the types of customers you're looking for and what attributes start to really create warning flags or warning notes that maybe this isn't the right customer or maybe this customer is now moving in a direction that you're not moving, so that you can either manage them back in or in a friendly way part ways and say, look, we're not ready. For example, we have a roadmap that has features at the end of the year. Oops. I don't think we need that right now. We have a roadmap with features at the end of the year that people would like to have right now. And they're threatening to leave. And I don't want them to leave, but I can't. I don't have a magic wand. I wish I did. And they're just going to have to either wait or move on, and we'll come back to them when we have the feature. And I don't think it needs to be angst-ridden. But it's important that transparency and that clarity coming from the product team about this is what we can handle, this is what we can actually do, and not to leave the customer success team in the dark about what actually works and which customers will actually be happy.
So I think it's very same with us, right? So in our case, like sales actually started, like we started selling in a lot of segments at the same time, from SMB to enterprise. And within all those segments, there was clearly identified customer profile that was very ideal, right? And when sales start selling, they start talking to people that's not the ideal customer profile. And that, for us, it kind of like, we could get a lot of pressure from them because those guys kind of change their direction and they think like that opportunity that's like probably bigger, probably smaller, but it's easy to get, although the product is not ready. And at some point, like you have to kind of step in and kind of make sure your product and sales strategy or success strategy is aligned, right? So if as a product manager, if I'm saying, this is my product roadmap, this is the persona that I'm trying to address, and this is the market, right? You have to be really deliberate that sales and support and success, like they are also focused on that specific market. Otherwise, there's a lot of confusion and then there is a lot of chaos in the company. And I've seen that firsthand, where people go in different directions and there is no one controlling them. And I think like that's one of the, like in my opinion, that's one of the things the product team should be doing on a on like weekly or bi-weekly basis, is ensure like who we are building the product for and making sure everyone is on the right track.
How often are you joining kind of your customer success teams in terms of actually getting direct feedback and bouncing ideas off of customers directly, whether it be user interviews or sharing the roadmap?
So probably too often. So I get pulled into a lot of the enterprise conversations. So I have a lot of those, both about account management as well as prospect. I'm personally in fewer of the cloud conversations, but my PMs are in many of them. Also, we have, as I mentioned, a dedicated UX team, and part of the UX team is a researcher, and she's actually every week running studies and working with customer success, both to find customers to talk to, but then also to just reach out and learn about what's happening. And she's constantly combing through the different tickets that are coming back and the different issues that are coming back to try to figure out where should we be looking. And that's a way of going beyond, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, it's a way of going beyond your analytics, right? Your click analytics or whatever other analytics you're using, to actually have the conversation with the customers to build some research around it. So we're having the conversations quite often. I don't know that that's always good, to be honest. I think sometimes the filtering is important, and I'm always struggling with exactly how often and how much the product team should be in front of the customer. I mean, they should be thinking about the customer, they should have empathy for the customer, but if they're in front of them too often, they actually think they know the customer better than everybody else, and that's actually a big risk. You need to pull them back sometimes, no, we'll listen to other people. And I've seen that in multiple companies, where it's important to be in touch, but also it's the product manager's role to understand a whole host of different issues and listen to many different voices, one of which is the customer's voice, proxy through customer success.
So for us, like, there are multiple channels. So we conduct quarterly customer advisory boards with our enterprise customers. So we have a panel of 12 or 13 customers that come in and we share our roadmap and they provide feedback. A lot of time that feedback is kind of their own problems. They're not really interested in our roadmap or anything, so they would just share their own problems. And yeah, you have to read between the lines, right? What they are saying versus what our roadmap says. You have to align it after that meeting. But yeah, like, that's one way. The other way is, like, we meet every 2 weeks with the customer success team, handful of people from customer success team, and they provide direct feedback from customers. And the third way is, like, recently we have started, I don't personally, I'm not a big fan of it yet, but people have started, we have started doing, like, story time telling. So every month, customer success team is told or, like, asked or requested, probably better word, to provide us, like, with stories, like, in a format that it's, like, set by the customer, right? How does customer feel about something, right? What is the customer going through on a day-to-day basis, right? The reason I'm still skeptical about it is I'm not sure if the feedback is being diluted or not, right? So sometimes, like, it's a balance, right? You can hear the customer calls directly, and one way is, like, ask customer success folks to tag certain calls, right? And we can hear calls directly. The other one is listen to the story in a paraphrase format, right? And there may be dilution in the message, but I think there is a balance. You should be doing both. So yeah, 3 ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you brought up CABs, customer advisory boards. I know I'm an outlier, but I'm just going to throw it out there and see if people react later. I've had really horrible experiences with CABs repeatedly. So, and they're not just CABs, I'm talking about CABs that I've been on as well as CABs that I've held. And it's not that the experience in terms of the people is fine, but quite often the CAB winds up talking about their own problems. They wind up believing that they own your roadmap, so they think that they can drive you where they want to go. You have to disband them quickly, otherwise they start to lord it over others in the market. It's just this constant problem where I've had really good luck with a similar approach where it's more just research-based. Like, okay, these are the topics we're going to go out and try to learn, and then you're very clear that, hey, this is a one-time event or a 2-time event. We're going to come in and talk about a particular topic, learn about it, maybe we go back a second time, maybe a third, but typically not. And you're getting this constant flow, and you also touch more customers that way. But I'm interested in hearing later other people's experience with
I would
CABs.
add on to it. I think personally, CS team, no offense, likes customer advisory board because it's a good way to retain customers, right? So if customers feel that they are part of a bigger picture, they are more likely to go with KeepTruckin, even if we are making mistakes, right? They would still trust us. So that's one of the reasons. I think CS teams like customer success advisory boards, right? Yeah, and sorry, I forgot one point that Matt mentioned is, like, do we talk to customers ourselves and how often we do it, right? So definitely in a lot of sales calls, the product management team is pulled in, right? And there is also a fine line where you shouldn't be in front of customers, because when there is a salesperson and an account manager or a sales engineer and a product manager, the conversation can go anyway, like, and they can tell us they can talk about a problem that has nothing to do with KeepTruckin, and then we start solving that problem for that customer, and like build out an integration or something. And when there is a product manager, the customer feels like, oh, this is the guy who's going to make the product. So maybe if I tell him like,
Magic wand.
yeah, magic wand. So you have to be cautious when you're in front of customers, and make sure your sales and CS folks know that when we are in front of a customer, it's not necessarily to create new features. It's just if they get feedback, if the customer provides feedback, we're just going to incorporate it in our roadmap rather than just going for that specific customer.
So we've talked a lot about kind of getting feedback from existing customers. How much of your time is really spent learning from those that are leaving you? And how do you make sure that you are spending time and working with, your head of CS, looking at churn? And I don't know how you best do this, but it's definitely a pain point for us. We feel that, and I'm sure you do. So what is the best method there?
So my experience with churn has been very different with different companies. So at CircleCI, with the SaaS side, I'll break it down to two pieces. So the cloud customers are very different than the enterprise customers. With the enterprise customers, I feel like I'm doing here. With the enterprise customers, we know what they need and what they want, and we know if they're churning off, we have visibility to that for months and months ahead. And we're having those conversations. And like I said, sometimes that happens and we part on good terms. Certainly since I've been there, but I haven't really heard of any before that, there really haven't been any negatives. And I'll give you a quick example. We had a customer leave before my time, and the second week I was at CircleCI, we went to that customer and had an all-day conversation with them to understand how they're using the software, and also so I could understand what types of situations they were seeing. They actually were hoping at some point to come back to us. So, I mean, that's the most rosy, beautiful possible side of losing someone, but the flip is on cloud. In cloud, we even see togglers that just disappear and then reappear and then disappear and reappear, and we have to figure out like what's going on. Why are they doing that? And in that particular case, through customer success, what we found in a lot of the notes and the comments was it was an issue around our pricing. And what they were trying to do was simulate usage-based pricing. And so when they wanted to use us, they would join and pay. And then when they were done with their CI process, they turn it off. And in that way, try to avoid paying more fees than they needed to. And that really opened up into an entire, very long project, which we're actually coming near the end of, which is to provide usage-based pricing. And that was entirely through that conversation and through the series of conversations with customer success. And even more importantly, it was a suspicion we had, but it was the customer success team that went back through all the notes and went back through and collated and figured out that a lot of the commentary that was coming in was talking about that.
Was this by month to month, like customers were going and then coming back, or what?
It was week to week, month to month.
Okay.
We have this model, not to get too detailed, we have this model
Yeah.
on containers, and so mostly this was customers that would jump up with more containers, and then when they didn't need 10 containers, they'd drop down to 2, and then kind of build for a while at 2, and then they'd jump up to 10 again, drop down to 8, and so they were just dynamically trying to dial up and down their usage. And for us, we were seeing it in the MRR, we were seeing all sorts of business effects of that. But in a sense, it had been just accepted as part of the business. And it was needing that. It was that voice of the customer. And we actually got the feedback. We saw the data, but we weren't sure why it was happening. And it was through the comments that we actually started to see the trend. And that's why we moved to the usage-based pricing. We're about to move and provide that.
For us, it's easy because all our products are sold at 12-month contracts. And within 12 months, you can easily figure out if customers are actually using the product or are threatening to churn. So we provide like really good support, inbound support. So a lot of folks actually dial in, and our customers are really vocal about their problems. And all customers are, but like our customers are somewhat more vocal about their problems. And we have a really good system in place where the support team is supposed to like tag accounts based on the risk level, right? Churn risk level. So and these are like 3 categories. So we think of our customers in 3 different categories, like enterprise customers, mid-market customers, and like very small SMB customers. So enterprise and mid-market are easy. You get direct feedback from the CS team, right? This specific customer is going to churn, and it's like 3 to 4 months before the contract ends. You know that this customer is going to churn. And for SMB, it's always like, you don't always know it, but a lot of times if you have enough support calls, it usually provides you good trends, right? So for example, we heard a lot of like threats to cancel our subscriptions, even mid-contract. And part of that was, okay, like we were not providing one specific feature, right? And that kind of wasn't a feature that was written on every support case, but like when you look at trends, you figure out, okay, this is the specific feature that people are referring to, and that way, like we were able to figure out like if we deliver on this feature, or if we kind of like somehow tell the customers that if you don't have this feature, you can do this, and like you will have the same effect. I think you can make customers happy. And in our case, like the customers, people who have churned are 1 or 2 big customers that churned were because of improper sales and service cycle, and that was early on in the company phase when the company was not mature enough to have proper service or proper sales. Yeah.
So can I add to that?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, it's a common story. We had it as well, where, and this is CircleCI, but actually experienced it at X-Time, experienced it at Dorado, it happens over and over again, which is scale, right? Your scale starts to get ahead of you. And the scale could be because of the number of feature requests coming in. It could literally be just you cannot support that many customers that quickly. And then that turns into a mess for customer success. And you have to get ahead of it, but quite often you can't. Right? Just the train that comes through and takes you out. So CircleCI's recent experience, we had to move from what we call 1.0 to 2.0. And it really was a fundamental rewrite. And during that time, there were a lot of churn issues. And so we had product and marketing. I wasn't there at the time, but I had a similar experience at X-Time. So what CircleCI had done was bring their marketing together, the product team together, and customer success, and they were meeting literally weekly, sending out emails, and they stopped all other analysis, and they were just looking at customer usage and which ones were likely to hit the scale issues first and getting in front of them. And they just basically every week had a short list, and they were just going down the short list every week, making sure to try to stay ahead of as much as they could. And they stopped all other activities so as to focus on that list and making sure that the people on that list would stay happy. They did things like split the architecture, started running in more than one location. I mean, they really went to Herculean ends, tried to keep the customers, at least reasonable through the period until they could replace the core infrastructure with the next level. And now that issue's gone, and basically the majority of those customers have come back. We still get customers, not so much now, but 6 months ago when I first joined, we were getting customers back that were saying things like, hey, we left because it was breaking, but now everything's working, so we're back. So I think that's also that being transparent with your customers and being clear with them and not getting too wrapped into the angst, right? Just understanding that, okay, bad things happen, we just be clear about it, here's what we're gonna do, and then you can reach back out again later when you fix the issues.
So I want to talk a little bit about, obviously there's a lot of customer success managers in the room, I'm sure, and being a good customer success, it's about customer empathy, but it's also about being able to sometimes challenge your customers. And I find a lot of the time, they will have requests, but it's not actually digging into what is the problem and what they're truly trying to solve. So how do you balance just all of these feature requests with truly trying to understand the problems customers are solving?
That's a good question. At CircleCI, it's been doubly hard because the product is for developers, and the challenges the developers have often are extremely specific to the language that they're writing in. And we support hundreds of languages, and it's physically impossible for a person to know that much about so many different environments. And so, I mean, obviously there's a cheat sheet and there's information to try to help out, but quite often it has to get punted to somebody else. And so the customer success role at CircleCI often includes this sort of that quick judgment call as to whether is this solvable or not solvable, where do I point them? We spent a lot of time on docs, and the customer success team and our documentation team spend a lot of time together making sure that questions as they come in, if they couldn't be answered on the spot, they go back over to the doc side and make sure it's been written up in the docs or FAQs and then sent back out to the customer. And you know, it's not great to have to do that, but I think it's actually better to get the right answer a little bit later than, you know, make someone feel good on the phone and then they get off the phone and then suddenly it doesn't work and now they're twice as angry. At X time, a prior company, we had a different situation where our customer success managers actually came from the industry. And quite often what they did, in fact what we promoted having them work beyond the software. So they actually would work with the customers on customer problems that may or may not actually intersect our software. And when it did, we were there to help and explain how it worked. And then also that allowed them to introduce new features. I know it's self-serving in doing that, but it allowed us to introduce new features into the market that way, just by saying, hey, if you're talking with the customer and they bring up a particular topic, make sure to mention this feature. And so we were able to improve adoption as well through that path. But it was very different, a very different experience. We had, in that particular case, I had a customer success team that in many cases knew more about the customer's business than the customer themselves. And they were able to provide truly expert advice. And whereas at CircleCI, I mean, I was an engineer, I couldn't handle half the calls. There's just no physical way anyone could. And so we really have to have that backstop process where we answer what we can, we point them in the right direction, and then we go and pull the dogs from elsewhere.
So when the customer success team started at KeepTruckin, there were around like 5 customer success managers, and we used to get a lot of feedback, and some of that could be challenged up front, right? And the product could have been used in X way to kind of address that challenge the customer was facing. So what ended up happening was like every 2 weeks we would meet, and the customer success team and product management team. And what we would do is like go through the feedback that they received and probably say no to everything, right? And challenge customer success team first, right? And I'm not saying like it's a blanket rule, but you try to challenge the customer success team. Okay, like if you got feedback X, can you do it? Can you kind of address that problem using our feature Y, right? And we figured out like how product can actually be used to solve certain customer problems, right? That led to 2 things. One is like customer success team kind of was trained more in the product, right? And the second thing is eventually when we grew from 5 to, I'm not sure how many success managers are there now, but it's more than I as a product manager can handle, right? So what happens now is like there are designated people in customer success team who are actually challenging the customer success managers, right? So the feedback kind of goes through a customer success, like they have to discuss it with the internal customer success manager lead, right? And that person is usually able to say yes and no. And when that feedback comes to us, the filtered feedback, it's always something that we can't say no to anymore. So, yeah.
I just want to touch on that a little bit further. Is that nearly like you have, because I think CSMs, great CSMs will act like product field managers. They're out there on the front lines doing it. So was your way of scaling your product team by having like someone embedded in the CS team? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, it wasn't embedded in the CS team, right? So, but those guys could. It's actually like when it started out, right? When new CS folks start, like they don't fully understand the product or industry, right? Mm-hmm. And there are like, if you have people who know the industry, it's very easy because they can just pick up the product and solve challenge customer problems using the product. But we started off with pure CSMs that had no experience with the product or industry, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a matter of like training, telling like how product can solve Y problem, right? And once that started happening, then there were like senior enough folks within the CS team that were able to vet feedback And those were not product field managers, but more like when ideas come to them, they would, okay, like if the customer is facing Y problem, okay, like X feature would solve it. Let's try to do it. Let's try to figure out a workaround. If not, then escalate to product team.
Okay, last one from me. I'm just wondering, what has been the most compelling story that a CS leader has kind of brought to you, or case? I would be very interested to know.
Well, let's see here. So, I've been through a number of sunsetting experiences, which is, I think, one of the worst words that a CSM can hear. Oh no, something's gets sunsetted, it's gonna be a nightmare. Because everything goes sideways on you. And one of the questions that came back as we were going through that sunsetting experience, we were also in the process of getting acquired. This is a prior company. We were in the process of getting acquired. So we were gonna sunset something and get acquired. So basically no one wanted this to happen, but it had to. And it was the customer success person who came back and was able to re-segment our existing customers in a different way, without getting overly specific to that product. But basically, by rethinking how we were approaching the customers, he was able to restructure which ones we could move when. And from a product standpoint, it meant this weird hopscotch of features. So we had this list of parity features that we felt that we had to get done to get everyone to move over. This quite often happens with sunset experiences, right? You decide you want to sunset before you actually have feature parity. That's one of the ways you get to feature parity. It's probably not great, but that's one way to drive the team. And so he came back with a way to kind of move around the different features so that we could really make sure that we moved correctly one set of customers before the next set, and we weren't sort of beating our head against everybody. The risk we were sort of facing and the problem we were facing was by adding one body of features, we were going to end up telling everyone to move, but no one would be able to because they were missing one of 20 other features, right? And so there was this constant puzzle problem. And he understood both our customers better and our product well enough. I mean, really intimately understood the customers and the product so that he could come back and say, look, this is the business flow that you're going to enable. You'll make people upset that they have to move, but this set of customers can run their business on our software if we make these few changes, and then we can go on to the next set. So it was incredibly important. I don't think we would have made the sunset that year if he hadn't understood the customers and gone through with his team and figured it out. And to his credit, his team spent multiple days offsite just really going through the same process my product team did. They came up with their own parity list. They came up with their own feature list. They went through their own segmentation process and then came back. And really was a comparison of analysis. And before he went off to do that, he was like, are you sure I should do this? And it was his idea, yeah, go. And I think it was really good they did that. That was really helpful.
So the CS team won in that case.
CS team 100,
Yeah.
0. No, yeah, it was critical.
Yeah.
For us, so one of the things that we did in a lot of sales cycle when we were trying to grow is made rough commitments, right? That will deliver these features sometime in near future, right? That's good, right? For sales, because they have to sell and the product is sold. But when it comes to CS team, now they have to support it, right? Every phone call the customer has, they ask about this feature. When is this feature going to be delivered, right? And although, like if you think about it, like traditionally product, like deadlines, release schedules, and all those are owned by product team and like engineering team, right? But we are now, like we are still in the process of introducing where they are kind of the success manager who was kind of involved with that customer where rough commitment was made is also an owner of that feature, right? So he also kind of has weekly, not weekly I would say, but check-ins of sorts, right? Okay, like are we on track? Is the project at risk or anything of that sort? So he can manage expectation, he or she can manage expectations accordingly. Because we have had problems where sales team, we actually had a feature in contract, right? But we kind of got lost track of it, right? Because of fewer product people, fewer engineers and all that. And then when the When we were actually supposed to start work on it, we never did. We never knew it was part of the contract. And then the CS person was really upset because customer was threatening to not just churn, but also kind of do press releases and kind of like put bad word out there that okay, these guys are not the folks to go with, right? And immediately the CS person and the product person figured out the most minimal product that we could deliver for that customer. And then we both of us, we talked to that customer, made sure, understood their organization, because that wasn't just one person that we were trying to address, but it was a whole organization. So it was a really good experience where now the commitment is not just owned by product team, but it's a co-owned thing between product and CS.
Awesome. I want to open up now to Q&A. So anyone have questions? Oh, there was first hand I saw over there, striped t-shirt.
Matt, you were talking about the quantitative metrics that you look at from CS, and you mentioned two things. You mentioned one, like frequency by issue, and the second that you mentioned was like percentage of times that things get escalated to product engineering, something like that. So my question is that implies two things. One, that you have sort of a hierarchy of support issues. The second is that you have a process for collecting data against that hierarchy of issues. And so my question is like, do you trust the signal that's coming out of that process? And also, as a related question, how many people do you have in CS and also on the support team?
I'll let you repeat that.
I should just hand him the.
Yeah. It's like, no,
Asked about quantity of people. Both. What's that? Asked about quantity of people. Asked about the type of metrics we're pulling in and whether we trust the metrics that we're pulling in from the various sources, and also what we're doing with them and how we're indexing them. So let me take it from the metrics side first. So we struggle with our tools. If anyone tells me they don't struggle with their tools, I don't believe you. So we struggle with our tools. We are constantly trying to make them integrate better. We're constantly adding custom fields and getting rid of custom fields and adopting new metrics and new integrations and whatnot. So do I trust it? Not uniquely, but in aggregate, absolutely. Okay, I trust the trends. So we do pull tickets in. We do associate them by component area. So it's more than by team. It's looking at our architecture and which piece of our architecture, so it's not just by product or by SKU, right? Because that's a high level. You need to know your input by SKU, but also I want to see it down several layers lower. The issue in terms of the data that comes in there, there's a lot of noise, right? And we can't tell what's going on. And sadly, we do put that off to the side, and we are trying to work through it. I won't name names, but there are certain products where I think they're just built to make noise. But again, when you take a step back and you look at everything in aggregate, and you look back 30 days, you look back 90 days, you'll see trends, or at least we do. We see trends in our information. In terms of the teams aren't very big currently. We're also hiring. We have about 5 CSMs, we have about 3 CSEs, customer success engineers, which are sort of sales engineers, but sort of not sales engineers. I think CircleCI is really focused on customer success, and because our developers are customer, the customer success engineers both help with setup and debugging occasionally, and then occasionally they do sales engineering as well. And then on the product side, we have 5 product people, and we actually have a person on, so customer success rolls up into revenue, and we have a person on the revenue team who specifically focuses on the data and the quality of the data that's moving between the machines, between the different systems, to try to make sure we're getting clear signal. And this is where, I think the question earlier was the right question, this is where the quantitative then overlaps the qualitative, right? There are times where the CSM will just say, I know that to be wrong. Like, this is just bad data that's coming through here. But then the question is why, and we go explore that. We spend a lot of time, maybe too much, looking at that type of information and trying to understand it. But overall, it has helped because as you spend a lot of time, you build a system around it, and then you know what an upward trend versus a downward trend means. and then you can actually later not have to worry about the inputs, but you can just watch that trend and make decisions based on it. And that's helped us literally every week. It helps us figure out which things to tackle and when. I have a PM that's basically dedicated to that team, to those dashboards, making sure that the escalation paths are working to the other PMs. And he doesn't spend all day on it, but a couple hours a week, it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, so we are running at a different scale. So we have about 15 to 20 CSMs and about 100 support folks, and everyone can escalate everything. So right now, like it was like two to 3 months ago, that was a problem where everyone could escalate everything. And it definitely became a problem, right? 100 people escalating 100 different issues. So eventually we kind of introduced a tiering system, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. They existed, but the escalation never went through them when it came to new feature request. So now it's always ensured that tier 3 or tier 2 gets a look at it, which is just a handful of people compared to support folks. Or the CS folks that are limited, they take a look at it before it's escalated to the product team. And I would say there are like two categories of things that are escalated. One are issues, and the other are like new features, right? So when you look at issues, bugs, or problems, like those come through our standard Salesforce ticketing process. But our new features or ideas, they run completely separate. Because issues need to be resolved immediately, features don't need to be built immediately. So our features and all that, they come through a different system. We use AHA for product management, so all the ideas and everything are logged there. And CS folks are supposed to log all the opportunities so we can quantify our dollar amount for every idea before it's executed.
Actually, you raised something really interesting. So we have support separate from customer success.
Right.
And so tier 4 support, and just to answer the question earlier, is another about half a dozen people, quite a few there. But that's really taking a very different set of information through.
I saw right up the back there.
So 2 questions. First question is, aside usage, and this is to both of you guys, what are your other indicators of churn? Are there other indicators besides usage data that you see that, hey, this is going to predictably lead to churn?
So just to repeat the question, what are the other indicators of churn by usage?
Aside usage.
Aside of usage, sorry. This will be so dependent on every business, but.
Yeah, I was about to say this would be really dependent. So the question, yeah, do you repeat the question? So one of my data scientists has built a predictive platform to figure out who's going to churn when based on the details of the actual project structures that we have, and that is completely unique to CircleCI, right? Because what we do is we run the software through, right? There's the code base, and then we build the code base, we test the code base, we help them deploy it. We can look at attributes of the code base and code checking frequency, which is different than usage. Usage for us would be the actual build. The actual turning of the crank is the build, it's the test, it's the deployment, but we can look at attributes of the code base itself and the entities that are around it to try to understand where it's trending and get early signals, and we've been fairly accurate with that. We also use that to look at prospects. We have a whole free tier. We have 45,000 free customers floating, right? Many of whom eventually move over to paid, and we use similar models to understand them. There are times that model breaks fundamentally. It's very interesting to watch. We'll release a feature, and then that'll change behaviors in the system. We'll have to adjust the model, but still it gives us an early warning sign. My last company, that didn't work. We tried something similar, and we couldn't. Aside from usage, you're asking about the question, aside from usage, my prior company, we looked for similar signals, and we couldn't quite find a signal that was going to be a good predictor. But everywhere I go, that's always one of the first things I have the data science team do, is do some internal analysis and segmentation.
So I would start off by saying there is usage and then there is proper usage of the system, right? So, a lot of folks use our system, but they eventually get frustrated because they're not using it the way they do. So I'll give you an example. So every driver has to drive a vehicle, right? And the drive time is logged on that driver. But if the driver never connects, the drive time is unidentified, right? Meaning we know which vehicle was driven, but we don't know what driver it was, right? So one good indicator for us is like percentage drive time that's unidentified, meaning the drivers are are either not connecting or the fleet manager isn't taking the necessary action to assign that unidentified drive time to the drivers. So things like this is one metric, and then we have, and since our product has like a couple of features, right? It's a full fleet management platform, so there is EDTA and all of the metrics. But for our core product, that's primary driver. So understanding that people are properly using the system is very important. The other thing that we have done is we receive a lot of support tickets, and we usually classify them as like which team's fault it was that we got a support ticket, right? Or which team is actually responsible for that ticket, right? And we kind of categorize like a sales, support, product, service, and so on and so forth. And that categorization happens across CS support teams. And when anything comes up as like product, it's either, oh, I don't like this product at all, right, which is useless feedback. But other times it's really valuable feedback where they exactly say the problem that's going on, right? And if you see that trend kind of like jump up or down, you know there are problems.
So the second question I had was, you mentioned AHA. What other products do you guys love? What other products do you guys, or tools you guys use?
Use or love?
Oh.
So just for our internal tracking, so we have deep integration between AHA, Salesforce, and Jira. So from Salesforce, you can kind of like request new features, and you have to request features on opportunities. You can't just request features. That means that you have to actually quantify the dollar amount. And that's ideally, that's what it should happen, but people request feature on $0 opportunities, right? So we have to kind of filter through. That's one way of escalation of a feature. And between Salesforce and Jira, we also have deep integration. So if there are bugs or issues, they directly go from Salesforce to Jira. And AHA and Jira are also linked, because from AHA, all the stories that are generated, they are actually linked to Jira stories, and whenever something happens in Jira, you get a real-time update on the schedule of the feature, whether your feature is on track, whether the release is scheduled and it's on track or not. And when it's not on track, we usually comment on releases so the entire CS teams and sales teams know that something is wrong.
I think we use one of everything. Zendesk, Salesforce, Jira, AHA, Looker, Segment, Amplitude, right? It just goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
In terms of which ones I love, like really trust, a lot of them you can only trust in terms of what people put in. So I've been using AHA since it started, and I've had good experiences and bad. It's a great tool when you get good data in it. And I do like it for doing strategic planning. And Jira is a tool I love to hate, but it works, and aren't that many that work better. I'd say the one I'm really enjoying right now, choose that word, would be Amplitude. And I've used Omniture, I've used Google Analytics, I've used all sorts of them, and you can get everything done in all of them. So I'm frankly somewhat agnostic, but Amplitude's working really well for us currently. It gives me really good information and good segmentation, and we've been able to link it to Salesforce, so we can actually see which customers are doing what. So not just by session, we're actually able to see some more useful business-focused aggregation. So.
I want to add there, I never talked about analytics, right? So for analytics, like our favorite tool is Looker, because it gives you the most flexibility. And the bad side of Looker is that you need to have people trained to kind of like write all those looks and stuff like that. So I personally love Looker, but it's hard to use. The others that we use are like Mixpanel, but have we like, for an enterprise product, like tracking through Mixpanel, I don't fully see the purpose, right? Because the type of cohorts that we want to build, Mixpanel won't support it, or like if it were to support it, then we had to do like a lot of legwork. Instead of that, we can just build cohorts within Looker using the raw usage data that we are receiving on servers.
So I'll try and summarize that. Internal and external empathy, how important is it in terms of developing the relationship with the customers and with internal stakeholders, one being customer success?
For CircleCI, incredibly important, all the way to the point where it's something we talk about on the website. It's very central to the overall values of the company, not just empathy, but just overall understanding, inclusiveness, etc. In fact, it's certainly the most friendly environment I've ever worked in. It's been really interesting. People are very clear. It's not passive aggressive by any means. It's a very clear environment, but it's one where empathy is highly valued, and I was surprised the first day on the Slack channels, the number of Slack channels that were really all in one way or another focused on that. It's really a cultural value that the company has established and focused on, very different than other places I've been.
So we pride ourselves in service, providing service to customers. So there are two things that we differentiate on: providing really good support and service. So, and empathy is the core component there, right? So you need to empathize with the customers. Just even though they may be wrong, just treat them that they are right, and kind of then slowly challenge them that they can do something in a different way. So yeah, it's really important from an external perspective to have really good empathy. Internally, I would say I get along with CS team far better than sales team, because and that's primarily because, in my opinion, retaining revenue for a SaaS business is far more important than getting new revenue. And I would say like there is a delicate balance there, but a lot of time companies kind of ignore the fact that retaining is not as important as selling new product. And right now we are trying to find that balance, but having a really good relationship with CS team helps a lot. Plus CS team is kind of looking at much bigger picture. For 12 months they are servicing customers, versus sales team is kind of talking to customer like once, twice, or over the sales cycle. So having a really deep connection with CS team kind of generates a lot of good feedback.
Awesome. So I just want to say a huge thank you for coming in and sharing how we can do our jobs better. Thank you.